All right, buckle up. We're going deep into prophecy today with Zechariah. Visions, symbolism, the whole shebang.
Oh yeah, Zechariah's wild.
We're going to be looking at excerpts from chapters 1 through 14 of the Book of Zechariah.
Okay.
It's his fascinating prophetic book in the Old Testament.
What's really cool about Zechariah is how he blends that historical context and current events for the people he was speaking to with this expansive vision of the future.
That's a lot. And our mission today, if you choose to accept it, is to explore what Zechariah saw, what it might mean, especially those details that make you go, hold on, didn't see that coming.
I love those moments.
Right. So let's set the scene. Zechariah receives his first prophecy in 520 BC, just 2 months after the prophet Haggai starts preaching to the same community.
That timing is interesting, isn't it? It suggests a possible connection between their messages. Maybe they were even building upon one another.
Yeah, like a dynamic duo of prophecy.
Exactly.
And it's super important to note that Zechariah wasn't just a prophet. He was also a priest.
Very true. As a priest, he would have been deeply immersed in all those temple rituals and traditions. But he's also receiving these direct messages from God.
Right, so you've got this tension between the physical world and the spiritual realm playing out in his visions.
Definitely.
And then, of course, there's that backdrop of God's power and authority. He's referred to as the Lord who rules over all, over and over again in those early verses.
Yes, exactly. It's like this powerful reminder that even though they were living in this world of empires and all this uncertainty, God is ultimately in control, offering comfort and a challenge to those returning from exile.
It's not just a casual title, right? It's setting the stage for everything that's about to unfold.
Right.
And then Zechariah starts getting these crazy, vivid visions. First up, a man on a red horse among myrtle trees, followed by others on different colored horses.
Oh, yeah. A very attention-grabbing image.
Right. It's like something out of a movie. What's going on there?
Well, they've been patrolling the earth and reporting back that things seem peaceful.
So at least there's that.
There is. But here's where it gets interesting. God is angry. And not just with Israel's enemies, but with complacent nations.
So it's not a simple us versus them situation. God's holding everyone accountable.
Exactly. And this concept of God's active involvement emerges as a major theme throughout Zechariah. He's not passive. He's a powerful force shaping events.
Then we get this vision of the four horns. And horns, as we know, are usually symbols of power. But in this case, they represent the forces that have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem.
Yes, they've caused so much suffering.
Exactly. But then we see these four blacksmiths show up. And they're there to terrify the horns, to challenge and dismantle the very powers that cause so much suffering. It's like God saying, don't underestimate the power of the seemingly ordinary.
Absolutely. God can use anyone, even blacksmiths, to bring about justice.
It makes you think about how often in history, even in our own lives, we see obstacles overcome in unexpected ways.
Oh, for sure.
And then things get really surreal with the vision of this guy with a measuring line trying to measure Jerusalem.
Oh, yeah, but then an angel comes in and says, no need for walls. The city will be so populated and protected by God himself that physical boundaries become irrelevant.
And that protection is described as God being a wall of fire around Jerusalem. It's comforting, but a little bit intimidating at the same time, right?
Totally. It suggests that being on God's good side offers some serious security. But there are also consequences for those who oppose him. It reinforces this idea that God is active, fiercely protective, and ultimately in control.
Then we're introduced to Joshua, the high priest, who's standing before the angel of the Lord, but he's being accused by Satan himself.
Yeah, he's portrayed as wearing these filthy clothes, symbolizing sin and impurity.
But God steps in and defends him, right?
He does.
It's a reminder that even those in religious leadership are human and in need of grace.
Absolutely. Joshua's cleansing represents a fresh start, a purification that points towards a future hope. It foreshadows the coming of a very significant figure referred to as the branch.
The branch. That sounds like a title with some serious weight behind it.
It does. The branch represents a future leader, a king from the line of David who will establish God's kingdom on earth. And this concept of the branch is woven throughout Zechariah's prophecies.
It's like getting these little glimpses of a bigger picture, a plan that extends far beyond the immediate situation.
Right.
And then, of course, there's that famous menorah vision.
Yes, this one's packed with symbolism. Zechariah sees this golden menorah with 7 lamps, but what's unique is it's fueled by 2 olive trees through golden pipes.
Not your average oil lamp setup. What's the significance of that?
The angel explains that the vision is about Zerubbabel, who is going to rebuild the temple, But it's not going to be accomplished through human effort alone. The olive trees and those golden pipes represent God's spirit, empowering and sustaining the work.
It's like even when things seem impossible, we're not relying on our own strength.
Exactly. And then there's another layer here. The two olive trees are described as the two anointed ones, which could refer to Joshua and Zerubbabel, the priest and the governor working together. But it might also have a deeper messianic meaning.
A prophecy that works on multiple levels, pointing to both the immediate situation and the future. And then we get into a series of visions that are a bit more intense.
A little. He sees this flying scroll with curses against those who break God's law. He sees a woman representing wickedness trapped in a basket and carried off to Babylon. And then there are those 4 chariots with different colored horses representing God's forces being dispatched to the 4 corners of the earth.
It's a clear message that wickedness will be judged, banished, but also that God's power is at work in the world.
It's a warning, but it's also a promise.
We've gone from horses and horns to flying scrolls and divine chariots.
It's a lot to process, I know.
It is. And we're just getting started with Zechariah's prophetic journey. But before we dive into the rest of the book, what images or phrases from these visions stick out to you? What might they be saying about your own life, your relationship with God, or even the world around you? We'll be back soon to explore the rest of Zechariah's incredible visions and unpack their meaning.
I can't wait.
Last time, we left off with those chariots, God's forces being sent out. It felt like the end of a movie. But we're just getting started. So what happens next?
Well, we go from this image of divine power to something a bit more symbolic. Zechariah is told to make a crown and place it on Joshua's head. But remember, Joshua is the high priest, not a king.
As in, it's not about a literal crown.
No, it's thought to represent both priestly and royal authority, pointing to a future figure who will embody both roles, a king and a priest.
Oh, wait. The branch, right.
You got it. That future leader who will establish God's kingdom, the crown on Joshua, it's like a sneak peek.
Okay, I see. But now, the people of Zechariah's time, they're struggling with some questions about their religious practices, specifically fasting.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting how those ancient questions still resonate today.
For sure. So how did God respond to their concerns?
He emphasizes that true fasting isn't just outward actions. It's about genuine care for the vulnerable, for those who are suffering. It's like he's saying, it's not enough to just go through the motions. Your fasting should be reflected in how you treat others.
So faith isn't just personal piety. It's about living out your beliefs in a way that affects the world around you.
Absolutely.
Makes you think.
It does. And then Zechariah gives a series of promises, a vision of hope and restoration. God promises to return to Jerusalem to make it a city of truth and justice. He talks about gathering his scattered people, transforming them from a curse into a blessing.
It's a beautiful picture of a future where things are made right. Gives me chills.
It's powerful. But then the tone kind of shifts. We move into a section with pronouncements about different nations, and these pronouncements reveal this tension between God's judgment and his mercy. Some nations face consequences for their actions, while others experience transformation and renewal.
So God's holding everyone accountable, no matter their background.
That's right. And then we get to one of the most powerful images in Zechariah, the description of a coming king.
Oh, yeah.
He describes a king who is righteous AD, victorious, humble AD, riding a donkey.
Wait, a donkey? That's not the typical image of a mighty conqueror.
Right. It's this deliberate contrast, highlighting the king's humility and focus on peace. And for those familiar with the New Testament, it might even bring to mind Jesus' entry into Jerusalem.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's like we're seeing a preview. But then Zechariah himself takes on a new role, doesn't he? He becomes a shepherd.
He does. He's tending a flock that's destined for slaughter, which is a powerful metaphor for how God's people have often been treated, even by their own leaders.
It's tough to think about.
It is. And then, to make things even more symbolic, he takes 2 staffs.
Right. What was the meaning behind those?
One staff represents pleasantness, symbolizing God's covenant with his people. The other represents binders, unity.
Right.
But both staffs are broken.
That's powerful imagery. What are the staves in your life? The things you rely on, the connections you value that might be broken or need fixing?
That's something to think about. And then after he breaks the staffs, he's given 30 pieces of silver as his wages for shepherding.
30 pieces of silver. Makes you think of Judas.
It does. And it raises a bigger question, too. How often do we undervalue what God's done for us, trading our loyalty for something fleeting and ultimately worthless?
It's a sobering thought. And then to make things even more dramatic, he warns about another shepherd, a bad one, who's coming later.
Right. This shepherd is selfish, greedy, ignoring the vulnerable, and just seeking personal gain. It's like a warning against falling for empty promises and bad leadership.
But Zechariah's message isn't all doom and gloom, is it? There's hope in his visions too, right?
For sure. Even amid judgment and warnings, there's a promise of cleansing, of purification. Zechariah talks about a time when God will deal with sin and rebellion once and for all.
Okay, tell me about that. We need some good news after all this.
Well, he speaks of a fountain being opened up to cleanse sin and impurity. It's this image of forgiveness and renewal, a clean slate.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
Yeah,
It connects to that idea of salvation in Christianity, right?
Huh.
Sins being washed away.
exactly. And along with this cleansing, God removes everything that's led people astray. Idols, false prophets, those who twist God's word for their own benefit.
It's like God's making way for something new. But this purification doesn't sound easy.
There's a prophecy that 2/3 of the people will be cut off and die. It's a reminder that following God isn't always a walk in the park.
Right.
There can be consequences for turning away from him.
But there's that remaining third, right? The ones who stay strong.
Yes. They're described as being refined, like silver and gold in fire. They're the ones who stay faithful through the tough times. They emerge purified, stronger.
So even in judgment, there's hope for those who stick with God. And then we get to what many consider the climax of Zechariah's prophecies, the day of the Lord.
It's when imagery gets really epic. Zechariah describes Jerusalem under siege, plundered, the nations gathered against God's people, chaos and despair. But just when it seems like all hope is lost, God steps in.
The ultimate battle, what happens?
It's dramatic. God stands on the Mount of Olives, which splits in two, creating an escape route for his people. There's darkness, light, living water flowing from Jerusalem. The world is transformed by God's power.
This sounds like a movie. So who wins this cosmic battle?
The Lord becomes king over all the earth. His reign is absolute. It's the goal, God's kingdom established, peace and justice winning out.
Wow, Zechariah really paints a picture. But before we get lost in all this, what does it all mean for us today? What are the key takeaways from all these visions and prophecies? It's easy to get lost in all the details with Zechariah, all those horses and horns and scrolls and chariots. It's been intense. But what does it all mean for us?
Yeah, it's easy to get bogged down in the symbolism or the history. But Zechariah's message offers some timeless truths about God, about us, and the world.
So where do we even begin? What stands out to you as the most important message?
I think, above all, Zechariah reminds us that God is sovereign. He's the one in control, even when things feel chaotic and uncertain in our own lives or the world around us.
It's reassuring to know that, especially these days, when things feel like they're spinning out of control, that there's a bigger plan.
Right. And Zechariah also emphasizes that God is involved. He cares about justice, compassion. He holds us accountable for how we treat each other.
It's not just about personal piety, then. It's about our actions.
Exactly. And our actions have consequences, both for ourselves and others. But Zechariah also offers hope. He points toward a future where things are made right, where God's kingdom is fully established.
That's inspiring, this vision of peace and justice. It gives us something to aim for, even when things are tough.
It does. Zechariah's prophecies challenge us to live differently now, to be agents of hope and healing in the world, knowing that God is at work even when we can't see the whole picture.
It's like we're living in the already of God's kingdom, but waiting for the not yet.
I like that.
And Zechariah gives us a glimpse of what that might look like. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Zechariah, what messages have resonated with you? What insights will you carry with you?
And how might these visions inspire you to live differently, to make a difference in the world, knowing that you're a part of something so much bigger, a story of redemption, restoration, and God's love?
It's a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Zechariah. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking truth.